The dust storm that rolled through Ogden, Utah that September afternoon in 1876 carried more than just sand and tumbleweed. It carried the sound of laughter so bright and unexpected that Isaac Remington dropped his hammer mid-swing, nearly crushing his boot as he stood frozen on the porch of his weathered ranch house. He had been alone for 3 years now, ever since his parents passed within months of each other from fever. The silence had become his constant companion, broken only by the occasional neighing of his horses or the mournful howl of coyotes at night. At 27 years old, Isaac had grown accustomed to the quiet, had even begun to prefer it, or so he told himself each morning when he woke to another day of solitude on his cattle ranch 5 miles outside town. The laughter rang out again, cascading through the hot afternoon air like water over river stones. It was coming from the direction of the old Peterson property, which had stood empty for the better part of a year. Isaac squinted against the sun, watching as another cloud of dust rose from that direction. Someone had moved in, apparently, and whoever it was seemed to be having quite a time of it. He tried to return to his work, nailing down the loose boards on his porch that had been threatening to give way for weeks. But the sound kept drawing his attention, pulling at something deep in his chest that he had thought long buried. It was not just laughter. It was joy, pure and unfiltered, the kind he had not heard or felt since before his mother's hands had grown too weak to knead bread, before his father's eyes had lost their spark. The sun was beginning its descent toward the Wasatch Mountains when Isaac finally gave up on his repairs. He gathered his tools with more force than necessary, annoyed at himself for being so distracted by a neighbor's happiness. What did it matter to him if someone new had moved in? What did it matter if they laughed loud enough to wake the dead? This was the West, where folks minded their own business and expected others to do the same. That night, as Isaac sat on his porch with a plate of beans and hardtack, the laughter started up again. This time it was accompanied by music, a fiddle playing a lively tune that made his foot tap against his will. He could see lantern light glowing from the Peterson house, warm and inviting against the purple twilight. More laughter followed, and Isaac realized it was not just one person. There must be several people over there, celebrating something. He went to bed that night with the sound still echoing in his ears, and for the first time in years, his dreams were not colored by loneliness. The next morning dawned clear and hot, promising another scorching September day. Isaac was up before sunrise, as always, tending to his cattle and horses with the methodical efficiency of a man who had learned to do everything himself. He was checking the fence line along the eastern border of his property when he heard it again. The laughter. It was closer this time, coming from just beyond the small grove of cottonwoods that separated his land from what was now, apparently, his neighbors. Isaac straightened up from examining a fence post and wiped the sweat from his brow. He should just ignore it, should just keep working and pretend he heard nothing. Instead, he found himself walking toward the trees. He emerged on the other side to find a sight that stopped him in his tracks. A young woman was chasing a chicken around the yard, her skirts hiked up to her knees in a most improper fashion, her dark hair falling loose from its pins as she lunged and missed again. Each failed attempt was punctuated by peals of laughter that seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep inside her, unstoppable and infectious. "You cursed bird," she shouted, though there was no real anger in her voice. "I am trying to help you, you ridiculous creature. There is a fox around here somewhere, and you are going to end up as his dinner if you do not get back in your coop." The chicken, a plump red hen, seemed to have other ideas. It darted left, then right, squawking indignantly as the woman made another grab for it. This time she got a handful of feathers, but nothing more, and she tumbled forward onto her hands and knees in the dirt, laughing even harder. Isaac knew he should announce himself, should not be standing here watching like some kind of fool. But he found himself transfixed, not by the impropriety of her dress or even her unusual beauty, which was considerable even covered in dust and chicken feathers. No, it was the laughter that held him frozen. When was the last time he had heard someone laugh at their own misfortune? When was the last time he had heard joy that was not forced or polite but real and wild and free? Need some help. The words were out before he could stop them. The woman's head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise. They were green, he noticed, the color of new grass after spring rain. Dirt smudged her cheek and her hair was a disaster, but her smile did not falter for even a moment. "Oh!" she exclaimed, scrambling to her feet and trying unsuccessfully to brush the dust from her skirts. "Oh my goodness! I did not realize anyone was there. You must think I am absolutely mad, rolling around in the dirt like some kind of child." "I think that chicken has you beat," Isaac said, surprising himself again. He was not normally given to jokes or easy conversation with strangers. The woman laughed again, that same bright sound that had been haunting him since yesterday. "She certainly does. This is my first time trying to keep chickens, and I am beginning to think I may have bitten off more than I can chew, as they say." The hen chose that moment to make a break for it, heading straight for the open gate that led to Isaac's property. Without thinking, he moved to intercept, scooping up the bird in one smooth motion that came from years of wrangling cattle. The chicken squawked and flapped, but Isaac held firm, tucking it under his arm like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "Oh, you wonderful man," the woman cried, clapping her hands together. "You made that look so easy. Here I have been chasing her for half an hour." Isaac carried the chicken to the coop and deposited it inside, securing the latch that he noticed was hanging loose. "Your gate is not fastened right," he said, examining the wire. "That is probably how she keeps getting out." "Is it? Oh dear, I have no idea how to fix something like that. My father always handled such things back home in Philadelphia." She walked closer, peering at the latch with genuine interest. "Would you be able to show me? I hate to be the helpless female, but I truly do not know the first thing about fence repairs. Philadelphia." That explained the cultured accent, the way she spoke in complete sentences even while covered in barnyard dust. Isaac felt suddenly aware of his own rough appearance, his work-worn hands and sun-darkened skin, the simple cotton shirt that had seen better days. "I could fix it for you," he offered, then quickly added, "if you want, I mean. I am your neighbor, Isaac Remington. My ranch is just through those trees." "Oh, you are my neighbor, how wonderful." She extended her hand in a gesture that was more suited to a drawing room than a chicken yard, seemingly oblivious to the dirt covering her palm. "I am Evelyn Oakley. I just moved here from Philadelphia 3 days ago. Well, myself and my Aunt Margaret, though she is inside resting at the moment." The journey was rather taxing for her. Isaac took her hand, meaning to give it a brief, polite shake. But the moment their palms touched, something shifted in the air between them. It was not just the warmth of her skin or the unexpected strength in her grip. It was something else, something that made him want to hold on just a moment longer than propriety allowed. He released her hand quickly, feeling heat rise to his face. "I will get my tools and fix that latch. Should not take more than a few minutes." "That would be so kind of you." "Might I offer you some lemonade? I made a pitcher this morning, and it is quite refreshing if I do say so myself." Evelyn's smile was warm and genuine, without any of the coyness he had seen in other young women on the rare occasions he ventured into town. "That would be nice, thank you." She disappeared into the house, and Isaac took the opportunity to examine the chicken coop more carefully. The whole structure was in decent shape, but there were several places where the wire had come loose or the wood had begun to rot. Nothing that could not be fixed with a few hours of work and the right materials. He was mentally cataloging what needed to be done when Evelyn returned with 2 glasses of lemonade so cold they were sweating in the hot morning air. "Here you are," she said, handing him one. "I brought ice from the ice house in town yesterday. Such a luxury after the hot train ride." Isaac took a long drink, surprised at how good it tasted, sweet but not too sweet with just the right amount of tartness. "This is excellent," he said honestly. "Thank you. It was my mother's recipe." Something flickered across Evelyn's face, a brief shadow that darkened her bright expression for just a moment before she seemed to shake it off. "So, Mr. Remington, what brings a man such as yourself to be available on a Tuesday morning? Do you not have work to attend to? I am a rancher. I make my own hours, more or less, and please call me Isaac. Only if you call me Evelyn. I find such formality rather silly when we are standing in a chicken yard, don't you?" She took a sip of her lemonade, her eyes studying him over the rim of the glass with frank curiosity. "A rancher. How fascinating. I have never met a real rancher before. Is it terribly difficult work?" "It can be," Isaac admitted. "But I like it. I like working with my hands, being outside. Seems to suit me better than working in an office or a shop." "I can understand that. I think I am going to like it here too, once I learn how things work." Evelyn gestured around the property, which showed signs of long neglect mixed with recent attempts at cleaning. "This place belonged to my aunt's late husband. He passed 2 years ago, and the property has been sitting empty ever since. Aunt Margaret finally decided she wanted to come out here and try to make something of it. She raised me after my parents died when I was 15, so where she goes, I go." "I am sorry about your parents," Isaac said, the words feeling inadequate even as he spoke them. "Thank you. It was 5 years ago now, a carriage accident. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." She smiled again, but it was gentler this time, more thoughtful. "What about you? Do you have family nearby?" "No. My parents passed 3 years back. Fever took them both within a few months of each other. I run the ranch alone now." Evelyn's expression softened with understanding. "Then we are both orphans of a sort. How strange that we should end up as neighbors. Perhaps fate has a sense of humor." They stood there in comfortable silence for a moment, 2 lonely people who had unexpectedly found something in common. Then Evelyn laughed, breaking the somber mood. "Listen to us, talking about death and sadness on such a beautiful morning. My aunt always says I have a terrible habit of being too honest too quickly. She says proper ladies should maintain an air of mystery." "I like honesty," Isaac said. "Not enough of it in the world." "Then we shall be honest with each other, you and I." Evelyn raised her glass as if making a toast, to new neighbors and honest conversations. Isaac clinked his glass against hers, feeling something warm unfurl in his chest. It was a feeling he had not experienced in so long he almost did not recognize it. Hope. He spent the next hour fixing the chicken coop while Evelyn watched and asked questions, genuinely interested in learning how to make the repairs herself. She was not afraid to get her hands dirty, he noticed, and she picked up the basic concepts quickly. Smart as well as beautiful, he thought, then immediately tried to push the thought away. He had no business thinking about his new neighbor that way. But as he packed up his tools and prepared to head back to his own property, Evelyn called out to him. "Isaac, wait, I just realized I never apologized." He turned back, confused. "Apologized for what?" "For my noise. The laughter, the music last night. Aunt Margaret and I were celebrating our first night in our new home, and we rather got carried away. I imagine we must have disturbed you terribly." Your house is quite close, after all. I promise we shall try to keep it down in the future." Isaac stared at her for a long moment, taking in her earnest expression, the way she twisted her hands together as if genuinely worried about having offended him. Then he heard himself say something he had not planned, words that came from somewhere deep and honest inside him. "Your laughter is my favorite sound." Evelyn's eyes widened in surprise, her lips parting slightly. A blush crept across her cheeks, pink against the golden tan she was already developing from the Utah sun. "That is possibly the loveliest thing anyone has ever said to me." Isaac felt his own face heating up. Had he really just said that out loud? What was wrong with him? "I should get back to work," he mumbled, turning away before he could embarrass himself further. "Will you come back?" Evelyn called after him. "To check on your repairs, I mean. And perhaps for more lemonade." He looked back over his shoulder, finding her smiling at him with an expression that was somehow both shy and bold at the same time. "Yes," he said simply. "I will come back." As Isaac walked back through the cottonwood grove to his own property, he felt lighter than he had in years. The silence that usually greeted him seemed less oppressive somehow, filled now with the memory of laughter and green eyes, and the ghost of a touch that had lasted only seconds but seemed to echo through his entire body. He tried to focus on his work that afternoon, riding out to check on his cattle in the south pasture, mending a section of fence that a bull had damaged, chopping wood for the winter that would come all too soon. But his mind kept wandering back to his new neighbor, to the way she had laughed at her own mishaps, to the intelligence in her eyes and the strength in her handshake. As evening approached, he found himself standing on his porch, looking toward the Peterson house. The Oakley house now, he supposed. There were lights in the windows again, warm and welcoming. And then, carried on the breeze, came the sound he had been unconsciously waiting for all day. Laughter. This time he smiled when he heard it. The next few weeks passed in a way that felt both slow and impossibly fast. Isaac found himself making frequent trips to the Oakley property, always with some practical excuse. The porch steps needed reinforcing. The well pump was acting up. One of the shutters was hanging crooked. Evelyn always greeted him with that bright smile and offered refreshments. And somehow he always ended up staying longer than he intended, talking about everything and nothing while he worked. He learned that Evelyn was 23 years old, that she had been engaged once, but had broken it off when she realized her fiancé was more interested in her late father's business connections than in her. He learned that she loved to read, that she had a terrible singing voice, but did not let that stop her from singing anyway, that she was afraid of snakes but fascinated by thunderstorms. He learned that she had come west not just because her aunt wanted to, but because she had wanted a fresh start, a chance to be someone other than poor Evelyn Oakley who lost her parents so young. In turn, he found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. About how lonely the ranch had become after his parents died, how he sometimes went days without speaking to another soul. About his dreams of expanding his herd, maybe breeding horses as well as cattle. About the guilt he sometimes felt for being alive when his parents were not, for not being able to save them from the fever that had taken them so quickly. Evelyn listened to all of it without judgment, her green eyes serious and understanding. "You cannot blame yourself for illness," she had said firmly. "Disease is not something we can control, no matter how much we might wish otherwise. Your parents would not want you to carry that guilt." Isaac had nodded, not trusting himself to speak around the sudden lump in his throat. No one had ever said that to him before, had ever thought to address the weight he carried without ever speaking of it. It was during the 4th week of their acquaintance that Isaac finally met Evelyn's Aunt Margaret properly. He had seen her from a distance a few times, a tall, thin woman with iron gray hair and sharp features. She had always given him a polite nod, but had never engaged in conversation. He had begun to wonder if she disapproved of his frequent visits. But one afternoon, when he arrived to fix a broken fence post, Margaret came out of the house with a tray of cookies and a pot of tea. "Mr. Remington," she said briskly, "I thought it was time we were properly introduced. I am Margaret Oakley, though you may call me Margaret if you wish. I understand you have been quite helpful to my niece and myself these past weeks." "It is no trouble, madam," Isaac said, standing and removing his hat. "You are my neighbors. It is the right thing to do." Margaret studied him with eyes that were almost as green as Evelyn's but sharper, more assessing. "My niece speaks very highly of you. She says you are kind and honest, two qualities that are rarer than they should be in this world." Isaac felt himself flush under her direct gaze. "Your niece is easy to be kind to." "Indeed." Margaret poured tea into 3 cups with practiced efficiency. "I must confess, Mr. Remington, I was somewhat concerned when Evelyn began spending so much time in your company. A young woman's reputation is a fragile thing, even out here in the wilderness. But I see now that my concerns were unfounded. You are a gentleman." "I would never do anything to harm Miss Oakley's reputation," Isaac said firmly. "I believe you, and please call her Evelyn." Such formality seems ridiculous given the circumstances. Margaret handed him a cup of tea and a cookie. "These are oatmeal with raisins. Evelyn made them this morning, though do not tell her I told you. She likes to pretend she is not trying to impress you with her domestic skills." "Aunt Margaret." Evelyn's voice came from the doorway, scandalized. She had been inside changing out of her work dress into something cleaner, her hair pinned back neatly though a few curls had already escaped. "You promised you would not embarrass me." "I promised no such thing," Margaret said mildly. "I am old. I have earned the right to speak plainly." Isaac could not help but laugh at the interplay between them. It reminded him of how his mother used to tease his father, that particular brand of affection that came with years of knowing someone deeply. Evelyn came down the steps, her cheeks pink but her eyes dancing with amusement. "Please ignore my aunt. She has decided that subtlety is a young person's game." "I like plain speaking," Isaac said, echoing what he had told Evelyn on that first day. "Makes things simpler. See?" Margaret said triumphantly to her niece. "I told you he would appreciate my directness. Now, I am going to go inside and work on my correspondence. You two may continue whatever it is you do out here, fixing things and talking about whatever young people talk about these days." After Margaret had gone inside, Evelyn sat down on the porch steps with a sigh. "I am so sorry about her. She means well, but she has absolutely no sense of propriety sometimes." "I like her," Isaac said honestly, settling down beside Evelyn with his cup of tea. "She reminds me of my mother. She used to say whatever came into her head, too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their tea and watching the afternoon light paint the mountains gold and purple. It had become Isaac's favorite time of day, these quiet moments when work was done and the evening stretched ahead, full of possibility. "Isaac," Evelyn said finally, her voice softer than usual, "may I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you ever feel like you are waiting for your life to start? Like everything until now has just been preparation for something you cannot quite name?" She turned to look at him, her expression vulnerable in a way he had not seen before. "I felt that way for so long in Philadelphia. Like I was just going through the motions, waiting for some unnamed thing to happen. And then we came here and I thought maybe this was it, maybe this was what I had been waiting for. A new place, a new start. But now I think maybe it was not the place at all, maybe it was something else entirely." Isaac's heart was beating faster, though he tried to keep his voice steady. "What do you think it was?" Evelyn bit her lip, seeming to wrestle with whether to say what she was thinking. Then she took a breath and met his eyes directly. "I think maybe I was waiting to meet you." The words hung in the air between them, bold and honest and terrifying in their simplicity. Isaac felt like he should say something, should respond with equal honesty, but his throat had gone dry and his mind had gone blank. Before he could formulate a response, a shout came from the direction of town. They both turned to see a rider approaching at a gallop, dust flying up from his horse's hooves. As he got closer, Isaac recognized him as Tom Brennan, one of the ranch hands from the large Anderson spread north of town. "Mr. Remington," Tom called out, pulling his horse to a stop. "We need your help. There has been a flash flood up in Huntsville Canyon. Several cattle are trapped, and we need every hand we can get to try and save them before nightfall." Isaac was on his feet immediately, his cowboy instincts taking over. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough. The Peterson Creek overflowed after that storm last night. Normally it is just a trickle, but right now it is running fast and dangerous. Mr. Anderson sent me to round up anyone who can help." "I will get my horse." Isaac turned to Evelyn, already mentally preparing for what would likely be a long, dangerous night. "I am sorry I have to go." "Of course you do," Evelyn said, standing as well. "Is there anything I can do to help? Just stay safe. Flash floods can be unpredictable. If you see water rising anywhere near your property, get to high ground immediately." He was already moving toward where his horse was grazing, his mind on the work ahead. "Isaac." Evelyn's voice stopped him. When he turned back, she was right behind him, closer than he had realized. "Be careful." "Please." The concern in her eyes made something twist in his chest. Without thinking, he reached out and squeezed her hand. "I will be. I promise." Then he was swinging up onto his horse and following Tom toward town, but he carried the warmth of her hand in his all the way there. The flood rescue turned out to be every bit as dangerous as Tom had suggested. The canyon was treacherous with mud and rushing water, and the cattle were panicked, making them unpredictable. Isaac worked alongside a dozen other men for hours, wading through waist-deep water, dodging debris, trying to coax frightened animals to safety. It was near midnight when they finally got the last of the cattle out. Isaac was exhausted, soaked to the skin and sporting several bruises from where a panicked cow had kicked him. But they had saved nearly all the animals, losing only 2 to the rushing water. It could have been much worse. He rode home slowly, letting his tired horse set the pace. The night was clear now, the stars so bright they seemed to pulse with life. As he approached his property, he saw something that made him pull his horse to a stop. There was a lantern burning on his porch, and sitting beside it, wrapped in a shawl against the cool night air, was Evelyn. She stood up as he approached, relief flooding her face. "Thank God, I was so worried." "What are you doing here?" Isaac dismounted stiffly, every muscle in his body protesting. "It is the middle of the night, I know. I could not sleep. I kept thinking about you out there in the dark, in danger, and I just—" She trailed off, wrapping her arms around herself. "I needed to know you were all right, so I came over and waited. I hope that is acceptable." Isaac could not remember the last time someone had waited up for him, had worried about his safety, had cared whether he made it home or not. The simple gesture moved him more than he could express. "You did not have to do that," he said quietly. "I know. I wanted to." Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes scanning his face, his muddy clothes, the cut on his forearm that he had barely noticed. "You are hurt. Just a scratch. I have had worse. That does not make it better." She picked up the lantern with one hand and took his arm with the other. "Come inside. Let me clean that cut and make you something hot to drink. You look half frozen." Isaac let her lead him inside his own house, too tired to protest. He could not remember the last time anyone besides himself had crossed this threshold. The place was clean enough, he made sure of that, but it was sparse and utilitarian, lacking any of the warmth or personality that had made it a home when his mother was alive. Evelyn did not seem to notice or care. She set the lantern on the kitchen table and immediately began heating water on the stove, moving around his kitchen as if she had been there 100 times before. "Sit down before you fall down," she ordered, pulling out a chair. Isaac sat, watching as she efficiently gathered supplies: clean rags, soap, a tin of salve she found in his cupboard. Her movements were quick and sure, and he realized she must have done this before, must have tended to injuries for someone she cared about. She cleaned the cut on his arm with gentle hands, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This should have been stitched," she murmured, "but it is too late now. We will just have to keep it very clean and hope it heals well." "It will be fine," Isaac said. "I heal fast. You better." She applied the salve and wrapped his arm in a clean bandage, her fingers brushing against his skin in a way that made him forget all about his aches and pains. "I do not want to have to explain to your neighbors how I let you die of infection on my watch, Evelyn." He caught her hand as she was about to pull away. "Thank you for waiting, for caring." She looked at him, and in the soft glow of the lantern her eyes seemed to hold entire worlds. "I told you what I was waiting for," she said softly. "I think you have been waiting for the same thing, whether you knew it or not." Isaac knew he should be careful, should think about propriety and reputation, and all the things that mattered in polite society. But he was tired and she was here, and the words she had spoken earlier that day were still echoing in his head. So instead of being careful, he pulled her down to sit beside him and kept hold of her hand. "I think you might be right," he said. "I have been alone for so long, I had forgotten what it was like to have someone wait up for me, to have someone care if I made it home." "Well, you better get used to it," Evelyn said, a smile playing at her lips, "because I fully intend to keep caring whether you like it or not." "I like it," Isaac said, and he realized it was the absolute truth. He more than liked it. He was falling in love with this woman who had burst into his quiet life with her laughter and her honesty and her complete disregard for what was proper in favor of what was real. They sat there in his kitchen until the water boiled. Then Evelyn made them both strong tea, and they talked in low voices about the flood rescue, about the cattle that were saved and the two that were not, about the way the canyon had looked in the darkness with water rushing through it like something alive and angry. Eventually, Evelyn glanced out the window and saw the first hints of dawn lightening the sky. "I should get back before Aunt Margaret wakes up and panics," she said reluctantly. "She knows I came over here, but she will worry if I am not back by sunrise." "I will walk you home," Isaac said, standing up despite his exhausted body's protests. "You do not have to do that. It is right through the trees." "I know, I want to." They walked slowly through the cottonwood grove, neither of them speaking, both reluctant to break the spell of the night they had just shared. When they reached her porch, Evelyn turned to face him. "Isaac, what I said yesterday about thinking I was waiting for you. I hope I did not make you uncomfortable. I know it was forward of me." "It was honest," Isaac said, "and I told you I like honesty. Do you feel the same way?" The question was barely a whisper, vulnerable and brave at the same time. Isaac looked at her standing there in the early morning light, her hair messy from the long night, her eyes bright with exhaustion and hope. He thought about how empty his life had been before she arrived, how the silence had felt like suffocation until her laughter had cracked it open and let the light back in. "Yes," he said simply, "I feel the same way." The smile that spread across Evelyn's face was like the sun coming up, bright and warm and full of promise. She stood on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek, then turned and hurried into the house before he could react. Isaac walked back to his own property in a daze, his hand touching the spot where her lips had brushed his skin. He fell into bed as the sun rose and slept more soundly than he had in years. Over the following weeks, something shifted between Isaac and Evelyn. They were no longer just friendly neighbors. There was an understanding between them now, an acknowledgement of feelings that were growing deeper with each passing day. They did not hide it exactly, but they were careful. Evelyn's reputation mattered, even out here in the Utah territory, and Isaac would not do anything to damage it. He continued to find reasons to visit the Oakley property, and now Evelyn and Margaret came to his ranch as well. Margaret turned out to be an excellent cook, and she took it upon herself to make sure Isaac was eating properly, often sending Evelyn over with covered dishes and stern instructions about taking better care of himself. "Aunt Margaret thinks you are too thin," Evelyn announced one afternoon, setting down a basket that smelled gloriously of roasted chicken and fresh bread. "She says all the bachelors out here slowly starve themselves because they are too stubborn to learn proper cooking." "I know how to cook," Isaac protested, though it was true his meals tended toward the simple and repetitive. "I have kept myself alive this long, have I not?" "Barely, according to Aunt Margaret. She says living on beans and hardtack is not actually living." Evelyn began unpacking the basket, laying out a feast on his kitchen table. "Personally, I think she just likes having someone new to mother. She was quite lonely in Philadelphia after Uncle Thomas died." "I do not mind being mothered," Isaac admitted. "It is nice, actually. Feels like having a family again." Evelyn paused in her unpacking, her expression softening. "Is that what we are, family?" "I would like us to be," Isaac said carefully, "if that is what you want too." "I want more than that," Evelyn said, meeting his eyes directly. "But I will take family as a starting point." They ate together, talking about their days. Evelyn was working on improving the property, planting a garden that she hoped would be productive come spring, repairing the barn that had been damaged by weather and neglect. Isaac told her about his plans for the winter, about how he needed to make sure he had enough hay stored up for his cattle, about the new bull he was thinking of buying to improve his herd. It was domestic and ordinary, and Isaac loved every moment of it. This was what he had been missing without fully realizing it. Not just companionship, but partnership. Someone to share the small triumphs and frustrations of daily life. Someone who cared about his plans and dreams as much as he was beginning to care about hers. As October arrived and the weather began to cool, Isaac realized he was happier than he had been since before his parents died. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for 3 years had evaporated like morning mist, replaced by a warmth that had nothing to do with the weather. He was in love, completely, irrevocably in love with Evelyn Oakley. He had not said it yet, had not found the right moment or the right words. But he thought about it constantly, practiced different ways of telling her in his head while he worked. He wanted it to be perfect, wanted to give her a declaration worthy of the way she had transformed his life. The opportunity came in mid-October, during one of the first real cold snaps of the season. Isaac had spent the day moving his cattle to a pasture closer to the ranch buildings, preparing for the winter months ahead. He was riding back to his house, just as the sun was setting when he saw smoke coming from the direction of the Oakley property. His heart leaped into his throat. Too much smoke. Something was wrong. He spurred his horse into a gallop, covering the distance in minutes. When he burst into the clearing, he found Evelyn and Margaret standing a safe distance from the barn, which was indeed on fire. But it was not an out-of-control blaze. It was contained to a small area near the door, and Evelyn had a bucket of water in her hands, clearly having just doused part of it. What happened? Isaac dismounted quickly, assessing the situation. The fire was already dying down, more smoke than flame now. My own stupidity, that is what happened, Evelyn said, setting down her bucket with a disgusted sound. I was trying to fix one of the lanterns in the barn, and I knocked it over. The hay caught, but thankfully I had water nearby and was able to put it out quickly. The barn is fine, just some scorched wood near the door, but I feel like an absolute fool. Isaac could see that she was shaken despite her matter-of-fact tone. Her hands were trembling slightly, and there was a smudge of soot across her forehead. Without thinking, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "You are all right," he said, more to reassure himself than her. "That is all that matters." Evelyn was stiff for just a moment, then she melted against him, her arms coming up to wrap around his waist. "I was so scared," she whispered. "Not for myself, but for what could have happened. If the whole barn had caught, if it had spread to the house, if Aunt Margaret had been hurt. But none of that happened. You acted quickly and put it out. You did well." They stood like that for a long moment, and Isaac became aware of Margaret watching them with an expression that was somewhere between approval and amusement. He should probably let go, should step back and maintain proper distance. But he could not make himself do it. Evelyn felt right in his arms, like she belonged there. Finally, it was Evelyn who pulled back, though she did not go far. She looked up at him with her green eyes still wide from the scare. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I do not know what you could have done that I had not already done, but I am glad you are here anyway." "I will always come when you need me," Isaac said. "I need you to know that, Evelyn. No matter what happens, no matter what you need, I will be here." Something shifted in her expression, a realization dawning. "Isaac, are you trying to tell me something?" Margaret cleared her throat pointedly. "I am going to go inside and start dinner. I trust you two will join me once you have finished your conversation." After she had gone, Isaac took Evelyn's hands in his. They were dirty from the fire, as were his from a day of work, but he did not care. "I am trying to say that I love you," he said, the words finally finding their way out. "I know it has only been a couple of months, and maybe it is too soon to say such things, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. You have brought light back into my life, Evelyn. Your laughter, your honesty, your strength. Everything about you makes my life better. I love you, and I want to be with you if you will have me." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling, that bright, beautiful smile that had captured his heart from the first day. "Oh, Isaac, I love you too. I have loved you since you stood in my chicken yard and told me my laughter was your favorite sound. I was just waiting for you to catch up." Isaac laughed, relief and joy flooding through him. "I am sorry I am slow. I am just a cowboy after all. Not used to having feelings, much less expressing them." "Well, you had better get used to it," Evelyn said, echoing her words from weeks ago. "Because I intend to make you express your feelings regularly from now on." Then she kissed him, properly this time, not a quick brush on the cheek but a real kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise. Isaac felt like he could not breathe, like his heart might burst right out of his chest. He had been kissed before, a few times in his younger days, but it had never felt like this. Like coming home. Like finding something he had not known he was missing when they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard. Evelyn was laughing again. That wonderful, joyful sound that had first drawn him to her. "We should probably go inside before Aunt Margaret comes out here to chaperone." "Probably," Isaac agreed, but he stole another quick kiss first, unable to resist. They walked into the house hand in hand, and if Margaret noticed their flushed cheeks and bright eyes, she was kind enough not to comment. She simply served dinner and kept up a steady stream of conversation about the upcoming winter and her plans for the property, giving them both time to collect themselves. After dinner, Isaac sat on the porch with Evelyn while Margaret cleaned up inside, despite their offers to help. The night was clear and cold, the stars brilliant overhead. Evelyn had brought out a blanket and thrown it over both their laps, and they sat close together, shoulders touching, hands intertwined under the blanket. "What happens now?" Evelyn asked softly. "Now that we have said it out loud?" "I suppose we court properly," Isaac said. "I call on you, bring you flowers, ask your aunt for permission to take you on chaperoned outings. All the proper things. That sounds dreadfully boring and formal given that we have been spending nearly every day together for months already." Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. "But I suppose we must observe the proprieties to some extent. Aunt Margaret would never forgive me if we caused a scandal." "I would never do anything to hurt your reputation," Isaac said seriously. "You mean too much to me, I know. That is one of the many reasons I love you." She tilted her head up to look at him. "How long do you think we must court before we can get married?" The word "married" sent a thrill through Isaac's entire body. He had been thinking it, of course, but hearing her say it so matter-of-factly made it real in a way it had not been before. "I do not know. How long does it usually take?" "In Philadelphia, it would be at least a year, possibly longer, but we are not in Philadelphia anymore. People do things differently out here, do they not? More practical, less concerned with appearances." "Generally, yes, especially when two people already know their own minds." Isaac squeezed her hand. "Are you saying you want to marry me, Evelyn Oakley?" "I am saying I cannot imagine not marrying you, Isaac Remington. So yes, if you are asking, my answer is yes." Isaac felt like he might float right off the porch. "I am asking. I do not have a ring yet, and this is not nearly as romantic as I had planned, but I am asking. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Evelyn said simply. 1,000 times yes." They sat there grinning at each other like fools until Margaret came out and asked if Isaac would be staying for coffee. He said yes to that too, not wanting the night to end, wanting to hold onto this perfect moment for as long as possible. When he finally rode home several hours later, the moon was high and the world was silvered with frost. But Isaac felt warm all the way through, warmed by love and joy and the promise of a future that was suddenly bright with possibility. The next day, Isaac rode into Ogden to buy a ring. The town was busy for a Wednesday, with ranchers and farmers coming in to sell their goods and stock up for winter. He made his way to the general store, which he knew had a small selection of jewelry. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the store with her husband, looked up from the counter when he entered. "Isaac Remington, I have not seen you in town in weeks. What brings you here today?" "I need to buy a ring," Isaac said, then felt his face heat up at the knowing look that spread across Mrs. Henderson's face. "A ring, is it? Would this have anything to do with that pretty lady who moved into the Peterson place? I heard you have been spending quite a bit of time over there." Isaac should have known better than to expect privacy in a small town. "Her name is Evelyn Oakley, and yes, it is for her. We are getting married." Mrs. Henderson clapped her hands together with delight. "Oh, how wonderful! She seems like a lovely girl. Very friendly when she comes into town, always has a kind word for everyone. You have done well for yourself, Isaac." "I know," Isaac said, and he meant it. He had somehow gotten incredibly lucky, and he was not going to take that for granted. Mrs. Henderson showed him her selection of rings, which was admittedly small. But there was one that caught his eye immediately. A simple gold band with a small green stone that reminded him of Evelyn's eyes. "That one," he said. "Is the stone an emerald?" "It is. Not a large one, mind you, but quite good quality. It was commissioned by a prospector 3 years ago for his intended bride, but she never arrived from back east. Poor man waited and waited, but she married someone else. He sold it back to us last year when he finally gave up hope. That is sad, Isaac said, thinking how easily that could have been him, waiting for something that never came. It is. But now it is getting a second chance with a happier ending. That makes it special, do you not think, Mrs. Henderson wrapped the ring carefully in paper. I hope you will both be very happy. We will be, Isaac said with confidence. He paid for the ring and left the store, slipping the small package into his pocket. He still had other errands to run, but he could not resist pulling the ring out once he was on his horse and looking at it again. It really was perfect, simple and elegant, just like Evelyn herself. He was just riding past the saloon when he heard his name called. Turning, he saw Robert Anderson, owner of the large ranch where they had done the flood rescue weeks before. Robert was a big man in his 50s with a gray beard and a booming voice, well respected in the community. Isaac, good to see you, son. How is that arm healing up? Just fine, sir. Barely even notice it anymore. Good, good. I wanted to thank you again for your help that night. We saved a lot of cattle thanks to men like you. Robert moved closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. I also heard a rumor that congratulations might be in order. Isaac had to laugh. Word travels fast. It is a small town. Not much happens that everyone does not know about within a day or two. Robert clapped him on the shoulder. I am happy for you. Everyone needs someone to come home to at the end of the day, makes all the hard work worthwhile. It does, Isaac agreed, thinking of how empty his house had felt before Evelyn came into his life. You planning to expand your operation at all? Now that you will have a wife, maybe thinking about a bigger spread. I have thought about it, Isaac admitted. But land around here does not come cheap, and I am not sure I could manage a much larger herd on my own. Well, if you ever need work or want to talk about opportunities, come see me. I could always use a good hand, especially someone I know I can trust. Robert tipped his hat. Congratulations again, Isaac. You are a lucky man. Isaac continued his errands with those words echoing in his head. He was a lucky man. Incredibly, impossibly lucky, and he was not going to waste a single day of it. That evening, he rode over to the Oakley property with the ring burning a hole in his pocket. He had planned to wait, to do something romantic and special, but he could not stand having it and not giving it to her. He found Evelyn in the garden, pulling up the last of the vegetables before the first hard freeze came. She looked up when she heard his horse, her face lighting up in a way that never failed to make his heart skip a beat. Isaac, I was not expecting you until dinner time. I could not wait. He dismounted and walked over to where she was kneeling in the dirt. I have something for you. Evelyn stood up, brushing dirt from her skirts. What is it? Instead of answering, Isaac pulled out the ring and held it out to her. I know I already asked you last night, but I wanted to do it properly, with a ring and everything. He felt suddenly nervous, worried that she might not like it, that it might be too simple or too small. But Evelyn's eyes went wide with wonder and her hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Isaac. It is beautiful. The stone it is the color of. Your eyes, Isaac finished. That is why I chose it, so I can always carry the color of your eyes with me. Evelyn laughed, but there were tears streaming down her face. That is the most romantic thing I have ever heard. Yes, Isaac. Yes, I will marry you. I said yes last night, and I am saying yes now, and I will keep saying yes every day for the rest of my life. Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands shaking slightly. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. I love you, Evelyn. I love you too. She kissed him, heedless of anyone who might see, her dirt-covered hands coming up to cup his face. When can we get married? I do not want to wait a long time. Neither do I. But we should give your aunt time to plan something, should we not? And we need to talk to the pastor, arrange a date. 2 months, Evelyn said decisively. That is enough time for Aunt Margaret to feel like we did things properly, but not so long that we drive each other crazy waiting. We can get married in December, before the worst of the winter weather sets in. December, Isaac repeated, testing the word out. 2 months seemed simultaneously like an eternity and no time at all. All right, December it is. They went inside to tell Margaret, who was predictably delighted. She immediately began making plans, talking about what needed to be done, who needed to be invited, what Evelyn would wear. Isaac mostly sat back and let the two women talk, content to watch Evelyn's animated face as she discussed flowers and food and all the details that he had never thought about. But then Margaret turned to him with a serious expression. Isaac, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Of course, Isaac said, sitting up straighter. Are you sure you are ready for this? Marriage is a serious commitment, and while I can see that you care deeply for my niece, you have only known each other for a few months. There is no shame in wanting more time. Isaac looked at Evelyn, who was watching him with those green eyes that had become the center of his world. I am sure, he said firmly. I know it has not been long, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Evelyn is the best thing that ever happened to me, and I am not going to let her get away. Margaret studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Good. That is what I needed to hear. You have my blessing, Isaac Remington. Take care of my girl, and we will get along just fine. I will spend the rest of my life taking care of her, Isaac promised. You have my word on that. The next 2 months passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Evelyn and Margaret threw themselves into wedding planning with the same energy Evelyn brought to everything she did. Isaac helped where he could, but mostly he focused on getting his ranch in order, making sure everything was ready to bring Evelyn home as his wife. He repaired every loose board in his house, replaced the worn curtains in the bedroom with new ones he bought in town, even bought a new bed frame to replace the rickety one he had been sleeping on for years. He wanted everything to be perfect for her, wanted her to feel like it was truly her home, not just the place she happened to live because she married him. In the evenings, he and Evelyn would sit together on one porch or the other, talking about their plans for the future. Evelyn wanted to keep chickens and maybe get a milk cow. Isaac wanted to expand his herd and maybe try his hand at horse breeding like he had always dreamed about. Together they talked about the children they hoped to have someday, about the life they would build together. I want a big family, Evelyn said one night, her head resting on his shoulder. I was so lonely after my parents died, even with Aunt Margaret. I want our children to always have siblings, always have someone to lean on. I want that too, Isaac said. I always wished I had brothers or sisters growing up. It would have made things less lonely after my parents passed. Our children will never be lonely, Evelyn said with determination. We will make sure of it. As December arrived and the wedding date drew closer, Isaac found himself getting nervous. Not about marrying Evelyn, he had never been more sure of anything, but about the wedding itself, about standing up in front of the whole town and making vows that would bind them together for life. He was not used to being the center of attention, had always preferred to work quietly in the background. But every time his nerves threatened to overwhelm him, he would think about Evelyn's laughter, about the way she looked at him like he was the most important person in the world, about how she had transformed his lonely existence into something full of joy and purpose. And he would remember that the wedding was just one day, but the marriage was forever. That was what mattered. The day before the wedding, Isaac rode into town to pick up his new suit and found the whole town buzzing with excitement. It seemed like everyone was planning to attend the ceremony, which would be held at the small church on Main Street. Mrs. Henderson assured him it would be beautiful, that Margaret and Evelyn had been working with the other women in town to decorate, and that there would be a reception afterward at the church hall. "Everyone is so happy for you both," Mrs. Henderson said as she handed him his suit, carefully wrapped in paper. "This town needs more young couples, more happy endings. You and Miss Oakley are giving everyone hope." Isaac had not thought about it that way, had not realized that his happiness might mean something to others. But as he walked through town, people kept stopping him to offer congratulations, to tell him how glad they were that he had found someone, that he would not be alone anymore. "Your parents would be so proud," old Mr. Jenkins said, shaking Isaac's hand with surprising strength for a man in his 80s. "They always worried about you being on your own. They would have loved your Evelyn." "They would have," Isaac agreed, his throat tight. He wished desperately that his parents could have met Evelyn, could have seen him this happy. But he liked to think they knew somehow, wherever they were. That night, Isaac barely slept. He kept running through the vows in his head, kept imagining what Evelyn would look like walking down the aisle, kept thinking about how his life was about to change forever in the best possible way. When morning finally came, he was up before dawn, too excited and nervous to stay in bed. He took extra care getting ready, shaving carefully, combing his hair until it lay flat, putting on his new suit that fit him better than anything he had ever owned. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. He looked happy. He looked hopeful. He looked loved. The ceremony was set for 2 in the afternoon. Isaac arrived at the church an hour early, too nervous to wait at home any longer. He was surprised to find dozens of people already there, decorating the church with winter greenery and white ribbons. Margaret saw him and hurried over, looking more flustered than he had ever seen her. "Isaac, what are you doing here so early? You are not supposed to see Evelyn before the ceremony." "I know, I am sorry. I just could not sit at home anymore. Is there anything I can do to help?" Margaret's expression softened. "Nervous, are you?" "Terrified," Isaac admitted. "What if I mess up the vows? What if I trip walking down the aisle? What if I say the wrong thing?" "Oh, my dear boy, none of that matters. All that matters is that you love my niece and she loves you. Everything else is just window dressing." Margaret patted his arm comfortingly. "But if you truly cannot sit still, you can help the men set up chairs in the hall for the reception. That will keep you busy for a while." Isaac threw himself into the work, grateful for the distraction. Other men from town arrived to help, and they worked together hauling chairs and tables, setting up the space where they would celebrate after the ceremony. The physical labor helped settle his nerves, gave him something to focus on besides his racing heart. Finally, it was time. Isaac stood at the front of the church with Pastor Miller, watching as the pews filled with what seemed like the entire town of Ogden. He spotted Robert Anderson and his family, Mrs. Henderson and her husband, Tom Brennan, who had come to get him for the flood rescue. All these people had come to witness this moment, to celebrate with him and Evelyn. The pianist began playing and everyone stood. Isaac's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. And then he saw her. Evelyn appeared at the back of the church on Margaret's arm, and Isaac forgot how to breathe. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that Margaret had spent weeks sewing, with lace at the collar and sleeves. Her dark hair was pinned up with white flowers woven through it, and she was carrying a small bouquet of winter greenery and dried flowers. But it was her face that captured him completely. She was glowing, her eyes locked on his, her smile so bright it rivaled the sun. She walked down the aisle toward him, and Isaac felt tears prickling at his eyes. He did not care who saw them. This woman, this beautiful, strong, joyful woman had chosen him, had seen past his loneliness and rough edges to something worth loving. How had he gotten so lucky? When Evelyn reached him, Margaret placed her hand in his and stepped back. Evelyn's hand was warm and steady in his, and when she whispered, "Hello," he found himself smiling despite his nerves. "You are so beautiful," he whispered back, not caring that everyone could probably hear. "You are not so bad yourself," she replied, her eyes dancing with suppressed laughter. Pastor Miller cleared his throat and began the ceremony. Isaac tried to focus on the words, on the solemn vows they were making to each other before God and this community. But mostly he was focused on Evelyn, on the way her hand felt in his, on the way she was looking at him like he had hung the moon. When it came time for the vows, Isaac's voice was strong and clear. "I, Isaac Remington, take you, Evelyn Oakley, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, for all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner, your best friend, your safe harbor in any storm. I promise that you will never be alone, never be afraid, never doubt that you are loved completely and absolutely. This is my vow to you, before God and everyone here, and I will keep it until my last breath." Evelyn's eyes were shining with tears when it was her turn. "I, Evelyn Oakley, take you, Isaac Remington, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, for all the days of my life. I promise to fill your days with laughter, your life with joy, your heart with the certainty that you are valued and treasured beyond measure. I promise that you will never be alone, that together we will build a life full of love and happiness. This is my vow to you, before God and everyone here, and I will keep it until my last breath." When Pastor Miller pronounced them husband and wife, and told Isaac he could kiss his bride, Isaac cupped Evelyn's face in his hands and kissed her with all the love and promise he felt for their future together. The church erupted in applause, but Isaac barely heard it. All he could hear was his own heart singing with joy. They walked back down the aisle together as husband and wife, and Isaac felt like his feet barely touched the ground. People crowded around them outside the church, offering congratulations and well wishes. Isaac shook what felt like 100 hands, but he never let go of Evelyn's hand with his other one. He was not letting go of her ever again. The reception was everything Isaac had not known he wanted. There was food and music and dancing. Isaac, who had not danced since he was a boy, found himself whirling Evelyn around the floor while the fiddle played and people clapped. She was laughing that bright, joyful laugh that had first captured his attention, and Isaac thought he had never been happier in his entire life. As the evening wore on and the dancing continued, Isaac and Evelyn slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The night was cold and clear, the stars brilliant overhead. Evelyn shivered, and Isaac immediately shrugged off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. "Are you happy?" he asked, pulling her close. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Evelyn said, leaning into him. "When I came west, I was hoping for a new start, a chance to build a different life. I never imagined I would find you. I never imagined it either. I had resigned myself to being alone. And then you showed up with your laughter and your chickens and your honest way of speaking, and suddenly I could not imagine being alone ever again." Evelyn tilted her face up to look at him. "You will never be alone again. I promise you that, Isaac. We are partners now, for better or worse, in everything." "Partners," Isaac repeated, liking the sound of that. "I like that." They stood there in the cold, wrapped in each other's warmth, until Margaret came out to tell them it was time to cut the cake. They went back inside to more celebration, more well wishes, more joy than Isaac had experienced in years. Finally, as the night grew late and the guests began to depart, Isaac and Evelyn said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon Isaac had decorated with ribbons and bells. They rode back to Isaac's ranch, to their ranch now, through the cold December night, their breath making clouds in the air, their hands clasped tightly together. When they arrived home, Isaac insisted on carrying Evelyn over the threshold, nearly dropping her when she burst into laughter at his fumbling. But he managed it, and they tumbled into the house together, breathless and happy, and finally alone. The house was warm. Isaac had made sure to stoke the fire before he left that morning. Lanterns burned softly in the bedroom, and Isaac saw that Margaret must have come by earlier to leave flowers on the dresser and turn down the bed. It was a thoughtful gesture that made his throat tight. "Welcome home, Mrs. Remington," Isaac said softly. Evelyn's smile could have lit up the entire territory. "It has a nice ring to it, does it not? Evelyn Remington. It sounds perfect." Isaac pulled her close, suddenly shy despite everything they had said and promised to each other. "Are you tired?" "It has been a long day." "I am not tired at all. I am too happy to be tired." Evelyn reached up and loosened his collar, her fingers gentle against his neck. "Besides, this is our wedding night. I do not want to waste a single moment sleeping." Isaac felt heat flood through him at her words, at the promise in her eyes. He had been trying to be a gentleman, trying not to rush her, but she was looking at him like she wanted nothing more than to be as close to him as possible. And he wanted that too, desperately. He kissed her, slowly at first, then with increasing passion as she responded with equal fervor. They fumbled with buttons and laces, laughing at their own awkwardness, until finally they tumbled into bed together, skin against skin, hearts beating in tandem. What followed was both clumsy and beautiful, tender and passionate, everything a wedding night should be. They learned each other's bodies, learned what brought gasps of pleasure and soft sighs of contentment. And through it all they kept laughing, kept talking, kept reminding each other how much they were loved. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the quilts, exhausted and content. Evelyn's head rested on Isaac's chest, her hair spread across his shoulder like dark silk. His hand traced lazy patterns on her back, and he felt more at peace than he ever had in his life. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for choosing me." "I love you too," Evelyn murmured sleepily. "And thank you for choosing me back. For letting me into your life when you had every reason to stay closed off and alone. I do not think I could have stayed closed off even if I wanted to. You just burst in with all your laughter and joy and knocked down every wall I had built." Isaac pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Best thing that ever happened to me." "Me too," Evelyn said. "Best thing that ever happened to me too." They drifted off to sleep like that, wrapped in each other's warmth, and for the first time in 3 years, Isaac's house felt like a home again. The next few months were an adjustment, as Isaac and Evelyn learned to live together as husband and wife. There were small disagreements about how to organize the kitchen, debates about whether they really needed 5 different kinds of preserves, moments of frustration when they got in each other's way. But there was also laughter and tenderness, and a deepening love that made even the mundane aspects of daily life feel meaningful. Winter set in hard that year, with snow that piled up past the windows and temperatures that made going outside a challenge. But Isaac and Evelyn were warm inside their home, learning each other's rhythms, building a life together. Margaret came to stay with them for a few weeks when a particularly bad storm made it unsafe for her to be alone at her property. And the 3 of them settled into an easy domesticity that reminded Isaac of how things had been when his parents were alive. As spring approached and the snow began to melt, Evelyn announced that she was pregnant. Isaac was overjoyed, though terrified at the same time. He had seen animals give birth plenty of times, but the thought of Evelyn going through that scared him more than he cared to admit. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," Evelyn said when she saw his worried expression. "I will be fine. We will be fine. I know, I just worry, I cannot help it." "Well, you have 7 months to get over your worrying. Because this baby is coming whether you are ready or not." Throughout that spring and summer, Isaac watched Evelyn's body change and marveled at the miracle of it. She remained active well into her pregnancy, insisting on helping with chores and maintaining her garden. Margaret came to stay again as Evelyn's due date approached, ready to help with the birth and the adjustment to having a newborn in the house. The baby arrived on a hot August night in 1877, after a long and difficult labor that tested all of them. Isaac paced the house while Evelyn labored in their bedroom with Margaret and the midwife attending her. Every cry of pain made him want to break down the door, but Margaret had firmly told him to stay out, that he would only get in the way. Finally, just as dawn was breaking, he heard it. A baby's cry, loud and strong and indignant at being brought into the world. Isaac's legs nearly gave out with relief. Margaret came out a few minutes later, her face tired but glowing. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy baby boy, and Evelyn is fine. Tired but fine." Isaac did not wait for permission. He rushed into the bedroom and found Evelyn propped up on pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiating joy, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. "Come meet your son," Evelyn said softly. Isaac approached slowly, almost afraid to get too close. The baby was so small, so fragile looking. But when Evelyn pulled back the blanket so he could see the baby's face, Isaac felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He has your eyes," Evelyn said. "Dark blue, like the mountains at sunset." "Can I hold him?" Isaac asked hesitantly. "Of course. He is your son too." Evelyn showed him how to support the baby's head, how to cradle him in his arms. Isaac held his son for the first time and felt tears streaming down his face. This tiny person was half him and half Evelyn, a perfect combination of both of them. A new life that they had created together. "What should we name him?" Evelyn asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had never quite settled on one. Now, holding his son, Isaac knew exactly what felt right. "What about Matthew? It was my father's name." Evelyn's eyes went soft. "Matthew Remington, I love it. Hello, little Matthew, welcome to the world." Matthew stirred in Isaac's arms, his tiny face scrunching up as if he was considering whether to cry or not. But then he settled, apparently deciding to give his parents a break for the moment. Over the following weeks, Isaac and Evelyn adjusted to life with a newborn. The sleepless nights were challenging, and Isaac had never felt more exhausted in his life. But every time he looked at his son, every time he saw Evelyn nursing him or singing him to sleep, he felt overwhelmed with gratitude for this life they had built together. Margaret stayed for 2 months to help them adjust, then returned to her own property with promises to visit often. "You two are going to be wonderful parents," she said before she left. "You already are." As Matthew grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, active baby, the ranch thrived as well. Isaac had taken Robert Anderson up on his offer of occasional work, and the extra income allowed him to expand his herd and finally try his hand at horse breeding. Evelyn's garden flourished, and she started selling vegetables and preserves in town, earning money of her own that made her proud and independent. Life fell into a rhythm that was both demanding and deeply satisfying. Hard work during the day, quiet evenings with his family. nights spent holding Evelyn close while Matthew slept in his cradle nearby. It was everything Isaac had never known he wanted, and he did not take a single day of it for granted. When Matthew was 18 months old, Evelyn told Isaac she was pregnant again. This time, Isaac was less terrified and more excited, eager to give Matthew a sibling. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and when their daughter was born in the spring of 1879, it was a quicker labor that left Evelyn tired but in much better shape. They named her Clara, after Evelyn's mother, and she was the image of Evelyn with her dark hair and green eyes. Matthew was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from changing her to singing her to sleep. It was chaos, wonderful and exhausting, and Isaac loved every moment of it. As the years passed, Isaac and Evelyn added 2 more children to their family, a son named Thomas and another daughter named Grace. Their house was always full of noise and laughter, and the organized chaos that came with raising 4 children. Isaac had to expand the house twice to accommodate everyone, adding bedrooms and a larger kitchen where Evelyn spent hours teaching their daughters to cook and bake. The ranch prospered under Isaac's careful management. He became known throughout the territory for his quality horses, and buyers came from as far away as Salt Lake City to purchase from him. Evelyn's preserves won ribbons at the county fair, and she eventually started a small business selling them to stores in Ogden and the surrounding towns. But more than the material success, it was the love that filled their home that made Isaac feel truly wealthy. Every night at dinner, surrounded by his wife and children, listening to them share stories about their days, he was reminded of how far he had come from that lonely cowboy who had been slowly withering away in silence. One evening, when the children were all finally in bed and the house was quiet for the first time all day, Isaac and Evelyn sat on their porch watching the sunset. It had become their ritual over the years, this quiet time together at the end of the day when they could just be Isaac and Evelyn again, not just mother and father. "You remember the day we met?" Evelyn asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "When I was chasing that ridiculous chicken around the yard, how could I forget? That chicken led me straight to the best thing that ever happened to me." Evelyn laughed, that same bright sound that had captured his heart all those years ago. "I was so embarrassed. I thought you must think I was completely mad. I thought you were beautiful and joyful and completely unlike anyone I had ever met." Isaac pressed a kiss to her temple. "I fell in love with you that day. I did not realize it yet, but I did. I remember when you told me my laughter was your favorite sound. I think that was the moment I knew I was going to marry you, even though we had just met, even though it made no logical sense. I just knew. I am glad you knew. I am glad you had the courage to tell me how you felt, to push me out of my loneliness. I might never have done it on my own." "Yes, you would have. Maybe it would have taken longer, but you would have gotten there. You were ready to love again, Isaac. You just needed someone to love." Evelyn turned to look at him, her green eyes serious. "Promise me something, anything. Promise me we will always make time for this, for us. It is easy to get lost in children and work and responsibilities, but we were Isaac and Evelyn first, before we were anything else. I do not want to lose that. We will never lose that," Isaac promised. "You are still the best part of my day. The children are wonderful and I love them more than I can express. But you, Evelyn, you are everything. My best friend, my partner, my reason for getting up in the morning. That will never change." Evelyn kissed him, soft and sweet, a promise renewed. "I love you, Isaac Remington, more now than the day we married, if that is even possible. It is possible, because I love you more now too. Every day with you is better than the last." They sat there as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple and pink. Inside, their children slept safely in their beds. Around them, the ranch they had built together stretched out in all directions. And in each other's arms, they had everything they could ever need. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and challenges. There were hard winters when they worried they might lose part of the herd. There were illnesses that scared them, particularly when young Clara came down with a fever that had them both remembering their own parents' deaths. But she recovered, and the fear brought them all closer together, made them appreciate each day even more. Matthew grew into a tall, serious young man who was a natural with horses, inheriting his father's gift for working with animals. Clara inherited her mother's business sense and eventually took over the preserve business, expanding it beyond what Evelyn had ever imagined. Thomas was the adventurous one, always getting into trouble, always pushing boundaries, but with a good heart that made it impossible to stay angry with him for long. And Grace, the baby, was quiet and thoughtful, happiest when she was reading or helping her father with the books for the ranch. Isaac watched his children grow with a mixture of pride and sadness. He was proud of who they were becoming, but sad that their childhoods were passing so quickly. Evelyn reminded him to enjoy each stage, to not wish away the present in fear of the future. She was right, as she so often was. When Matthew turned 18 and announced he wanted to start his own ranch on some land Robert Anderson was selling, Isaac felt both proud and melancholy. His son was ready to start his own life, to build his own legacy. It was what was supposed to happen, but it was not easy watching him go. "He will be fine," Evelyn said as they watched Matthew ride away with his new deed in his saddlebag. "We raised him well. He knows how to work hard, how to be honest, how to treat people with respect. He will build a good life. I know. I just hate seeing them leave." Isaac put his arm around his wife's shoulders, drawing her close. "They are not really leaving, not in the way that matters. They will always be our children, always come back to us when they need help or advice or just a home-cooked meal. That is what family does." Over the next few years, all their children eventually left home to start their own lives. Clara married a merchant from Ogden and moved into town, though she continued to run the preserve business. Thomas shocked everyone by becoming a deputy sheriff, using his adventurous spirit to help keep the territory safe. And Grace eventually moved to Salt Lake City to attend a teaching college, something almost unheard of for a woman at the time, but which Isaac and Evelyn supported wholeheartedly. With the children gone, Isaac and Evelyn found themselves alone together for the first time since the early days of their marriage. The house felt too big and too quiet at first. But gradually, they rediscovered each other, remembered what it was like to be just the two of them. They traveled more, taking trips to see their children and grandchildren as they began to arrive. They worked together on the ranch, which Isaac had scaled back now that he did not need to support a large family. They spent long evenings on the porch talking about everything and nothing, just enjoying each other's company. One evening, as they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, Isaac looked at his wife across the dinner table and marveled at how beautiful she still was. There was silver in her dark hair now, and lines around her eyes from years of laughter and worry. But to him, she was just as lovely as the day he had first seen her chasing chickens around her yard. "What are you thinking about?" Evelyn asked, catching him staring. "About how lucky I am. About how different my life could have been if you had not moved in next door. You would have found someone eventually. You are too good a man to have stayed alone forever. Maybe, but I would not have found you, and you are the only one I ever wanted." Isaac reached across the table to take her hand. 25 years, Evelyn. 25 years of laughing together, working together, building this life together. It has been the greatest adventure of my life." "Mine too," Evelyn said, her eyes shining with tears. "I came west looking for a fresh start, and I found so much more than that. I found a home, I found a partner, I found the love of my life." "Here is to 25 more years," Isaac said, raising his glass. "To 25 more years," Evelyn echoed, "and to laughter, always to laughter." They touched glasses and drank, and when Isaac heard Evelyn laugh at something he said moments later, he was reminded of that first day, of standing in his yard and being transfixed by the sound of pure joy. She had come to apologize for her noise, thinking she was disturbing him. But her laughter had never disturbed him. It had awakened him, brought him back to life after years of merely existing. "Your laughter is my favorite sound." He had meant it then, and he meant it now, and he would mean it every day for the rest of his life. As they grew older together, Isaac and Evelyn settled into a comfortable rhythm. Their bodies were not as strong as they once were, and they had to hire help to manage the ranch. But they remained active, remained engaged in their community and in the lives of their children and growing number of grandchildren. Margaret lived to the impressive age of 89, staying sharp and opinionated until the very end. When she passed peacefully in her sleep, Isaac and Evelyn mourned her deeply, grateful for the role she had played in bringing them together and supporting them through the years. Isaac turned 65, then 70, then 75. Evelyn was right there with him, aging gracefully, her spirit as bright as ever even as their bodies slowed down. They spent more time on the porch, watching sunsets, holding hands, remembering all the years they had shared. Their grandchildren grew, and eventually great-grandchildren started arriving. The house was frequently full of family, particularly during holidays, with multiple generations gathering to celebrate together. Isaac would sit in his chair and watch the chaos with deep contentment, thinking about how lonely he had been all those years ago, how empty his life had felt. One summer evening, when Isaac was 82 and Evelyn was 78, they sat on their porch as the sun set behind the mountains they had watched for so many years. Isaac held Evelyn's hand, her fingers thin and fragile in his, but still warm, still her. "I had a good life," Isaac said softly, "better than I ever dreamed possible." "We are not done yet," Evelyn protested. "We have more living to do, you and I know, but I wanted to say it anyway, wanted to make sure you knew how grateful I am for every single day we have had together." Evelyn turned to look at him, and her green eyes were still as bright and intelligent as they had been the day they met. "I am grateful too, my love, for all of it. The good days and the hard days, the laughter and the tears, all of it was worth it because we were together." "Your laughter is still my favorite sound," Isaac said, repeating the words that had started everything. Evelyn laughed, that bright, joyful sound that had not dimmed with age. "And you are still my favorite person. Always have been, always will be." They sat there as the light faded, hand in hand, hearts intertwined after more than 50 years of marriage. The ranch was quiet around them, peaceful and prosperous. Their children were settled and happy. Their legacy was secure, but more than any of that, they had each other. They had love that had endured through decades, through hardship and joy, through loss and celebration. They had built a life together from that first meeting in a chicken yard, and it had been more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Evelyn rested her head on Isaac's shoulder, and he pressed a kiss to her hair. They had been lucky, impossibly lucky, to find each other in this vast western territory. Two lonely souls who had recognized something in each other, who had taken a chance on love and been rewarded beyond measure. "I love you," Evelyn whispered into the peaceful evening air. "I love you too," Isaac replied, "always and forever." And as the night settled around them, wrapping them in its gentle embrace, they sat together under the stars they had watched for over 5 decades. Two people who had found in each other everything they had been missing, everything they had been waiting for, everything they needed to transform lonely existence into a life full of meaning and purpose and joy. The lonely cowboy had found his home. The woman seeking a fresh start had found her forever. And together, they had built something more beautiful than either of them could have created alone. A love story for the ages, started with laughter and sustained by devotion, partnership, and the simple truth that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them. Their story became legend in Ogden, passed down through generations. People spoke of Isaac and Evelyn Remington with warmth and admiration, holding them up as an example of what love could be when two people committed fully to each other and to building a life together. Young couples starting out would visit them, asking for advice on how to make a marriage last, how to stay in love through the years. Isaac's advice was always simple: find someone who makes you laugh and never take them for granted. Evelyn would add, be honest with each other, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. Together they would smile at each other with the easy comfort of people who had shared a lifetime, and everyone who saw them could feel the love that still burned bright between them. When Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 86, Evelyn was right there beside him, holding his hand as she had done for 61 years of marriage. She mourned him deeply, but without regret, knowing they had made the most of every day they had together. She lived 2 more years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling stories about the grandfather they had lost, keeping his memory alive. And when she joined him, the family buried them side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under the mountains they had loved. On their shared headstone, their children inscribed the words that had started everything. She came to apologize for her noise. He said her laughter was his favorite sound. Together they built a love that echoed through generations. And indeed it did. The children they raised passed on the values they had learned from watching their parents' loving partnership. The grandchildren told their own children about the great-grandparents who had loved each other so completely. The great-great-grandchildren grew up hearing stories about Isaac and Evelyn, about how a lonely cowboy and a woman seeking a fresh start had found each other and built something beautiful. The ranch remained in the family for generations, a testament to the legacy they had created. And though time moved on, and the world changed in ways Isaac and Evelyn never could have imagined, their love story endured, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from taking chances, opening your heart, and letting someone else's laughter become your favorite sound. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the land or the money or the success they had achieved, though those things were good and worthy. What mattered was the love they had shared, the family they had built, the joy they had brought into each other's lives. They had transformed loneliness into belonging, silence into laughter, mere existence into a life truly worth living. And somewhere, under those Utah stars they had watched together for so many years, their spirits remained intertwined, their laughter echoing through eternity. A testament to the enduring power of love when two people are brave enough to reach for it and wise enough to hold on to it with everything they have. The end.